49 when he took his own life a year ago. He'd suffered from mental illness for many years. But, pleased to say, his best-known book, which is Striker Boy, originally published back in 2010, there it is for you, is being re-released. I'd better get my fingers out of the way. There you go. It's being re-released. But for a special reason, because you may see the little logo up there, it's been released as part of a campaign with the mental health charity Mind. So to explain a little more about it, I'm very pleased to say that the broadcaster Johnny Gould is with me, a very close friend of Johnny's, the author's, to explain a little more. And thanks very much for coming in.
It's a pleasure, Hugh. Good evening.
Thank you very much for joining us. Why is the book being re-released?
After Johnny died, in the wake of the shock and turmoil, I said to a very good friend of mine by the name of Nigel Cannon, he wrote lovely books, particularly Striker Boy, and I didn't want this work to be buried with Johnny. Is there anything positive we can do? Maybe we can partner with a charity in mental health and raise some money in the name of this fine children's author so that all the good that he left on this earth could be acknowledged as widely as possible.
It's a great idea, and it's a lovely book, so it's a nice way to do it and to raise some money. Tell us, for those who are watching and maybe are not familiar, tell us a little about his condition and how it developed and how, you know, it led ultimately to his tragic death.
Johnny suffered from severe depression, particularly in his latter couple of years. He was able to function pretty well. He was a fantastic father and husband and son, etc. And unfortunately, it overtook him in his latter couple of years. He could no longer cope. But that doesn't mean to say that his massive personality didn't shine through quite a large amount of the time. If you want to know from me that he was distant and he was away, that was absolutely not the case. 90% of the time, he was with us, engaged, full of joy in life, which makes this all the more enraging and sad, actually.
It's a lovely image, isn't it, of the family?
Yes.
And
it's lovely.
That conveys its own happiness, really, at that moment. How have they coped?
Those brothers, those boys, are a credit both to Johnny and indeed Fiona, Dr. Fiona Starr, my first cousin. And they've kept it together remarkably well. They're a team, and they have been buoyed, I think, by the love. This is a mourning period. You know, this is, we're still inside the 1 year. The Jewish custom of the stone setting actually hasn't happened, the consecration of the tombstone. And yet this power of good that we're trying to do, to remember Johnny, to remember all the work with Mind and at strikerboy.com to raise money for the mental health charity, which Johnny actually did use during his life, is something that we're all really, we're really rooted in.
Can I ask how he managed the condition? Because clearly he did lots of good things and achieved lots of good things over quite a few years. He was diagnosed at what age?
Yes, in his 20s.
In his 20s. So how did he go about managing it, and was he treated? I mean, how did that work?
He sought counselling, he took medication, there were operations, he had OCD. These diagnoses followed after each other. There were career setbacks. Who doesn't have a career setback? But when Johnny had them, he spiralled into severe depression, and they were points of crisis, and yet he bounced back. In retrospect, knowing now that he took his life, you view every incident differently, and that's why when this happened, it was such an almighty shock. I think that goes without saying.
Well, we wish you well with this project.
Thank you.
It's important to say, Johnny,
Thank
because
you.
it's a lovely thing to do. And of course, for people to recognise the efforts that are being made for lots of people out there with mental health problems. And in recent years, it's become, thankfully, much more acceptable to be able to talk about it. And maybe this will help as well.
I think that's the most important thing, to treat mental health with the same regard as perhaps physical health issues too.
Of course. Good to talk to you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
indeed. Johnny Gould there for us.